Hello, this is Music Tech Help Guy, and welcome to episode 66 of my Logic Pro 10 video tutorial series. This is part 8 of my mixing mini-series, and in this episode we're going to talk about creating submixes, sometimes called submasters. Actually, they're more commonly called submasters. I like to call them submixes. We'll talk about buses and aux tracks. So I'm going to just go to my mixer here, and one of the things that I like to do, that's pretty common to do, and this really comes from the analog world where you can sort of create groups of tracks that are controlled by a single fader, is I like to basically take my like instruments, so like all of my drums or all of my rhythm guitars or all my vocals, and I like to bus them over to an auxiliary track, so that I can control the volume of all of those simultaneously. Now, yes, you can do that with groups too, but the thing is, if you group these together on an aux track, you can actually compress them all together or EQ them all as a group. And so that's the goal of this here is. So the way we go about this is we have to send all of our tracks, or make the output of all of our tracks, say all of our drum tracks here, to a common output. Now, right now, they're all going to the stereo out. I want to send them to a bus. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what a bus is a digital or analog pathway through which an audio signal can travel. So right now, in a DAW, it's digital, obviously, but in an analog console, it's a physical wire. It's a way to route signal from one place to another. Now, you can do this with sends, as I sort of mentioned in the first video when I was talking about my audio capture. We will talk about that eventually when we get to using reverb and time-based effects. But here, all I'm doing is I'm selecting all of my drum tracks, and on the output tab, instead of sending them all to the stereo output, I'm going to send them all to bus 1. So what this is going to do is when I choose bus 1, I'm changing the output of all these tracks. They are going to go to bus 1. Now, what is bus 1 going to? Well, one of the cool things in Logic is that when you create a bus, it automatically creates a corresponding auxiliary channel strip, or aux track, that receives that bus. So here's my aux track that was actually created after I chose that bus as its output. And at the top of the aux track is the input of the aux track, which is now bus 1. So the output of all those tracks was bus 1, and the input of this single aux track is bus 1. So now when I press play, all of the drums are going to go to this one track, this one aux track here. So I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to name this drum mix. So what we've created here is called a submaster or submix, whatever you want to call it. I call it submix, but submaster is usually the more common term. So the great thing about a submaster or submix is that now I can control the volume of all of the drums with one single fader. This is going to control the volume of everything going into this aux track. So you can also mute it. You can solo it as well. So let me just hit play here. So I'm soloing it.
Self-destruction, you ruin life,
and you can also mute it. So it sort of lets you control the grouping, or control the volume of an entire group of instruments. Now, what I generally like to do is I like to group all of my main sort of ensembles of instruments. I like to make a drum mix, a rhythm guitar mix, a lead guitar mix. Believe it or not, I even make one for bass, even though the bass has its own track. I'll do one for all of the vocals and then one for all of the synths. So let me do that real quick. By the way, the difference between an aux track and a regular audio track or instrument track is that an aux track can receive an audio signal, but you can't directly record to an or to an aux track. So it's a way to sort of route signal from one place to another. Actually, the bus is what actually routes it from one place to another. So if you go look at any classic analog console like an SSL 4000, SSL 9000, those analog mixing consoles will have their regular channels, but then usually in the center we'll have what are called VCA groups or VCA masters, whatever you want to call them. And these are a way to sort of like the same thing we're doing here, to bus signal from multiple tracks and sort of sum it down to a single channel, to a single fader. So what I'm going to do is, I've already done this with the drums. Let me go over to the guitar, the rhythm guitar here. Let's make these go to bus 2. So it's going to automatically create an aux 2 for us that has bus 2 as its input. I'll double click on that and I'll call this the guitar mix. By the way, if you ever need to create an aux track without doing it automatically like we're doing here, you can just go to options, and you can say create new auxiliary channel strip. In Logic 9, there used to be a little button over on the side here that they no longer have. So you have to go to options, create new auxiliary channel strip, or just press Control N. So that's my guitar mix. Let me move on to my lead guitars. So all the lead guitar and the guitar solo are going to go to another bus. So I'll say bus 3. Bus 3 is going to be our, I'll say lead guitar bus. Bus 4 is already used because I'm using it as my my audio capture. Originally, I was using like bus 20 just to sort of keep it out of the way, but like I said, I had that glitch where it was making my output be mono instead of stereo, so I changed it to bus 4 and it corrected it. I'm not sure that bus 4 really mattered, so I'm just going to skip bus 4 and move on to bus 5. So my bass guitar, I'm going to make bus 5. I like to do this, and I'll tell you why in just a moment, but I like to bus everything, every single track in the session, even if there's just one of them, like in the case of the bass here. So I'm going to have a bass mix. The choir and the little stutter string will be bus 6. So I'm going to make that the synth mix. And then the all of the vocals. So these are going to be bus 7. And this is going to be called... Oops, that's the wrong one. That is my output. Don't want to mess with that. This is the, I'll call this Vox mix. There you go. Now I like to do this because when I sort of get like my general compression and EQ on all my tracks, I sort of get the tone I want. There's really no reason other than using the sends, which we'll come back to later. There's really no reason for me to see all these audio tracks anymore. So what I like to do is actually hide my audio and instrument tracks after I've bussed them. You just deselect them up here, and all I see now is sort of like my subgroups or my submasters. So now I can obviously I got my capture aux here. You won't have that, but I have all of my sort of groups of instruments to work with. So I'm sort of summing down I'm just basically simplifying the mix down to 6 faders now. Now that I've got the balance roughly the way I want it. So if I just want to hear the drums, I can solo just the drums. If I just want to hear the guitars, I can just solo the guitars. Just the bass. Just the synths. Or just the vocals.
From me, pray for death to...
Now, what this also does is it sort of allows me to see where the resting position of the groups of tracks are. So if I hit play, you'll see some of them might be clipping, some of them might not be clipping.
Take me quickly, living life in a lie. You're the only thing that keeps me alive. Oh Lord, you lift me up, and Lord, you pull me down.
So I'm able to sort of do another sort of rough mix here with these, get the levels down so nothing's clipping, and I actually can pull them all down very easily and make sure that the output's not clipping anymore. The other great thing about this is I can start adding effects to these groups of instruments. Typically what I'll do with a lot of these is I'll add an additional level of compression on the aux track to sort of glue the instruments together, just make them feel more like a single instrument, especially with drums. You know, the drums are essentially just one instrument, but several different tracks, you know, several different instruments sort of coming together for one sort of overall, you know, amalgamous groove. So what I'll do is, you know, if the drums in general just need to be a little brighter or a little darker, now I can add a new plugin to my drum mix. So maybe I want a little EQ. I'm going to go ahead and use the linear phase EQ. The linear phase EQ generally doesn't, as I said earlier, doesn't colorize the tone as much as the channel EQ, and there's some sort of digital artifacts that can be produced from the channel EQ. With the linear phase EQ, the reason I don't use it on individual channel strips is it eats up more processing power. So maybe I just want to, you know, view all of the drums in my analyzer. You know, I'm getting a lot of this 200 sort of woody sound in here, so let me just sort of pull a little of that out. There's really no need for anything below about 25 hertz anyway. And let's maybe pull up sort of the audible 1 to 5 range, the area that our ears are most audible to, just to brighten it up a bit. Whoops. So now the snare drum's a bit brighter sounding. Another thing I like to do with the linear phase EQ is put it on the rhythm guitar, and then I can just boost the frequencies that I feel are missing or that I can see in the analyzer are missing. Again, the linear phase EQ eats up more processing power and causes more latency issues, which is why I don't use it on individual tracks, but I'll put it on aux tracks instead. Just to sort of minimize how many instances of it I have. So you can see overall we got sort of a dip in 2K. So let's maybe pull 2K up a bit. There you go, make it a little brighter. One thing I really like to do, as I said before, is I like to add sort of compression to everything as well. So I'm going to go ahead and use a plugin that is not a stock Logic plugin. Like I said, I'm going to try to avoid using too many third-party plugins in this series, but I really like this one because it sort of fattens up the tone a bit. I'm going to use it's a Waves plugin, and it's called the Kramer tape. I really like it because it just sort of fattens the sound a bit. I like to use it on drums, just to fatten the drums up a bit. And we can see that our drums are sort of clipping now. So I can go ahead and throw, under dynamics, throw the limiter on there to keep it from clipping. And maybe on my vocals I want a bit of soft compression to sort of just to glue all that together as well. Just maybe like a 2-to-1 ratio. And again, this is just to sort of lob off some of the maybe louder transients that weren't taken care of earlier.
Hold me down. We'll never change our ways. Oh Lord, why can't you lift me high when we're just living on the run?
we go. So that's just using aux tracks to create submasters. Obviously, we haven't really talked much about limiting yet. I'm just using the stock limit setting, which just keeps everything from clipping, and I turn the soft knee off. With the Kramer tape, you'd probably have to use a different, like a type of compression or something to sort of fatten this up, some special, some fancy EQing and compression to sort of get the same sound that you get from this. But I just like to put tape emulators on things because they sort of fatten the sound up a bit. But yeah, this basically allows us to individually control sort of groups of instruments rather than instruments individually. Really, the only other work we need to do on the individual tracks from this point on is doing some track automation and doing and putting properly putting reverb on the track. So we'll talk about that as well, because you don't want to put reverb on every single track. What you want to do is you want to sort of bust it out to an aux track as well. So in the next episode, we'll talk about properly using reverb. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.